Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host, and this morning we welcome back Deborah Bracato, a nurse and pro-life advocate who works tirelessly to fight for the unborn. Good morning, and welcome back to the show, Deborah.
Good morning, Keith. It's good to be back with you.
Thank you so much again for joining us on this very important topic. And if you're out there listening, maybe in a state that didn't have any of these amendments, propositions in the ballots this last election period, just to kind of set the stage here, we had question 1 passed with 75% voter approval in Maryland. We similarly in Arizona, we had Prop 139 that garnered 61% support, and then we had Montana, Colorado, and several other states witnessing this positive abortion law outcome. Deborah, it boggles my mind. How did this happen? Why do you think this happened?
Well, there's a lot of deception around these amendments, and there's a lot of fear. So first of all, the abortion lobby has been very good at educating what they want people to know. And it's really a lot of false information. They've been able to convince the majority of the population, including people that call themselves pro-life, that abortion is medically necessary. This is not true. Abortion is actually never medically necessary, and doctors are not going to be prosecuted for treating a pregnant woman in distress or anyone in distress. Women do receive emergency medical intervention if they need it for a miscarriage. Most miscarriages happen without any kind of intervention from the doctor. But if they need a DNC for a miscarriage because the miscarriage is incomplete, they will get that. That's not an abortion because the baby has already died and just they need to remove the rest of the baby so the mother does not get infected or have anything worse happen to her. And so this is not true. It's never medically necessary. And they throw that fear tactic when they say women's rights are under attack. And, we're going to protect, now they call it reproductive freedom. So people need to watch out for that because that is not defined. In Maryland, an abortion amendment would have easily passed if it had been a straight abortion amendment. This amendment passed easily, too, because people thought it was only about abortion. But we've now got reproductive freedom in our Constitution, and it's undefined. They also did not put any minimum age limits in it. So it applies to children, this new vague reproductive freedom, but it's male and female. So we in Maryland have a whole host of consequences that we're going to be dealing with.
Wow, that is absolutely insane. When I started seeing results from my own state in Arizona, I realized for myself how foolish I was for thinking people would see through some of these deceptive words. But I guess people fell for it. I don't know what other reason it could have been aside from maybe just ignorance or, especially for Catholics out there, lack of understanding what our church really teaches about life.
The media has done a good job of carrying the message for them. Mm-hmm. They're not covering it fairly. I know I experienced that in Maryland, that there were very few, I could count on one hand the number of media outlets that actually covered it fairly and asked the questions that needed to be asked. But most were calling it an abortion amendment, for one, which it's not. It's called reproductive freedom, and it's really, the better term would have been anti-parent amendment. And most people thought it was a straight abortion amendment. And they also believed that if they voted no, that it was going to make abortion illegal in Maryland. That wasn't true. Abortion has been unrestricted since 1992, including allowing minor girls to get abortions without parental consent. And then as of 2022, they passed a law in the General Assembly to require full funding of abortion through Medicaid and private health insurance. So again, it's by design that the voters really didn't know. They also don't understand that once you put a right into the Constitution, it makes it very hard to put any restrictions or implement any health protocols, or protocols to prevent injury to the patient or infection or any other type of thing. It makes it extremely hard because the abortion advocates will immediately sue and claim that this puts a burden on people exercising that right. So it really is a big disinformation thing that the abortion lobby does.
Yeah, yeah, it's very disheartening to see this. And from what I understand, I'm not a legal expert by any means, but when they say words like enshrining into the Constitution and states' constitutions, I'm assuming there's no way to remove it unless there's some, I don't know. Do you know?
It's nearly impossible. What would have to happen is the General Assembly or, the legislature in another state, they would have to pass a law that would just get rid of it, nullify that amendment. And they need a 2/3 majority to do that. And then they would have to put it on the ballot again and get the voters to also agree. So you really have to change. And it's not going to happen unless the voters want it. So you have to change what the voters want because the politicians want to get reelected. So as long as they feel the voters want this, they're not going to do anything about it. And in order to amend the amendment, put something on there that says, we need this safety protocol to prevent infection, it would have to pass through the legislature and then go to the ballot again and have voters say, yeah, we think this is important. And that's very unlikely to happen. So it's,
yeah.
The good news is that Florida and South Dakota did not pass their amendments. Now, fortunately, in Florida, they have a 60% threshold. Otherwise, if it were a simple majority, like in other states, it would have passed. So those two didn't pass. And in the Florida amendment, that's important because they were actually going to allow minor girls to get abortions without parental consent. So that was going to be the first way they chipped away at parental rights in Florida. And I'm sure many voters didn't realize that because they put that line in there, parental notification, not parental consent, just parental notification must happen. So that's not parental consent.
No, not at all. So obviously it's going to be very difficult to get these essentially removed. But what specific actions can Catholics take now to support women in crisis pregnancies and promote alternatives to abortion in light of these new laws?
Well, number one would be to donate money to crisis pregnancy centers. Because in states that have these amendments for abortion, clearly now you have state-sponsored abortion. So money is going to be funneled into abortion clinics, which means that money won't be funneled into crisis pregnancy centers, which I volunteered at one. And I know that it was hard to get any money from the state. They would have to apply for a grant. And usually it was only about $10,000, not 10 million. Like the abortion industry gets millions. So the pregnancy centers really need that money to continue to serve their clients and pay for the sonogram machines and the medical technician that will, reads the sonogram and a doctor to be there also to read the sonogram. So, and then other people like the director and just to pay for all the diapers and other supplies for their clients in need. And that's the thing, the poor really loses out with these amendments because, the poor who are choosing motherhood, they need those services. And they're not going to get them if these crisis pregnancy centers don't get the money they need. It's more than just having the baby. You go to the hospital, have the baby. But during their pregnancy, they're visiting these pregnancy centers and they're getting education about their pregnancy and about how to raise their child and how to take care of themselves. And they're getting resources to support them after they have the baby, like the diapers and clothing. And they just get that emotional support from the volunteers at the pregnancy centers.
Yeah. So if someone isn't or maybe unable to participate, with monetary values, would you say just going searching for the nearest pregnancy or pro-life agency to volunteer, or what would you recommend for those?
Yeah, definitely volunteering. I can say that, I volunteered for over 8 years, and it is one of the biggest blessings in my life, meeting these women who just wanted to have their babies. Sadly, most of them had an abortion in their past, which they deeply regretted. So it was a blessing to be able to pray with them and help them heal from that, and then see them just be so joyful about their current pregnancy and be able to get the help they need. And many of the women that we saw there also went from being poor to being employed and being able to provide for themselves, because we also would help them with that, like applying for jobs and how to fill out a resume, practice interviewing with them, things like that, that some basic skills that a lot of us take for granted, that because of their, their circumstances, they didn't necessarily get those abilities.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about just in general, there's a lot of states out there that haven't had this issue yet. Obviously should not be complacent, because it could happen to any state now that we're starting to see it pop up here in all of the states like Maryland, Arizona. Any advice you would want to give listeners before we kind of transition over to the after show clubhouse, that you want to give listeners out there that might be feel like they're in the safe zone for now?
I think they should really sign up to get information from either like Moms for Liberty, because these amendments are now affecting parental rights. And if they can do anything to help Moms for Liberty find out what's happening in their local schools, but also sign up to get the newsletters and information from their local pro-life organizations, because they have a lot of information about legislation, and that's going to be important to pay attention. The words matter. They need to understand what the law actually says. I know in Maryland, I already saw this last session, they are already going to use the language of the LGBTQ community for any legislation that has to do with, pregnancy or reproduction. I saw it in, bills that were going through the assembly using terms like birthing persons instead of pregnant women. So you need to pay attention to that, because women's rights are really under attack with this, not abortion rights, but women's rights are under attack when you are replacing the word female or woman with person. That's male and female. So we have to be concerned about what's going to happen to women when it comes to these things too.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for joining us this morning. Really helpful to get through this, work through this out, especially now that we're facing an uphill battle.
Can I add one positive, though?
Go for it. Yeah,
Trump,
real quick.
Just real quick. President Trump has said he wants to end child mutilation. So I'm really excited about that could take some of the teeth out of some of these amendments and laws that are allowing children to consent to these drugs and surgery. So that's good news. And I just, I see good things on the horizon, and our volunteers were thrilled to be part of what we did. So, and none of us regret it. So
love to see it. Thank you so much, Deborah. We can find more at healthnotharmmd.org. But hey, we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern here on Morning Joy. God bless and make it a joyful day.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.